first off, thank you all for taking some of your time out of what I can only assume is a very busy day, it being a Wednesday, and I find those are oddly busy days. So thank you guys very much for joining us for a little conversation that we're continuing in our final-ish, and we'll get more on that, of our three-part webinar series about the ABCs of composable commerce. So with me again this week are three of my favorite people in the ecosystem. So if you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves again, we will, I'm sure the order is different, so I can't just say top. So let's start with Maribel.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I'm Maribel. I'm a technology partner manager at Cloudinary, and I lead our partner built integrations program.
Awesome to have you. George, you're up next.
Yeah, George from BigCommerce. I'm a solutions engineer and happy to be working on this project.
All right, and last but absolutely not least, Sajid.
Thanks, Nick. Name is Sajid Momin. I am just a senior director of integrations here at Algolia.
Excellent. And I am Nick. I am the senior director of partner enablement over here at the Contentstack side. So glad to have you guys all here with us again. And today we're just going to sort of talk about a project that we've all been working on together. As you guys probably know, we've built a bit of a store, right? A complete composable experience of all of our tools and technologies actually working kind of hand in hand. So actually, I think if we jump to the next slide, we'll be able to sort of see all of those things kind of laid out. So just to sort of frame up what we've done so far, right, is that we've built a front end that is hosted on Vercel as a hosting platform, just because it's super easy to work with. We can do things like push out, webhook based changes in our platforms, and that does all the rebuild, which is wildly important when you have disconnected teams of developers, like the four of us kind of all working together, doing things in sort of our spare time here and there. It allows everything to be, updated for us kind of in real time and get those builds firing off. And we all get notified when I commit terrible code that doesn't work and it breaks everything. Fortunately, it just doesn't push that up to production. So that's always a treat. And you can see over on the left-hand side sort of the different technologies that we're using here, right? So obviously the four of us are being represented by our organizations here. So we've connected all of these platforms together to create a seamless experience that you guys will be able to experience in a couple of weeks when all of this officially goes live. So we've gone through this process, right? And we discussed why we did this a lot in the last webinar. So if you missed that, I would highly encourage kind of watching the whole series, because we talk about sort of the goal of this, which I guess in short is to prove the point. We wanted to show people how easy it was for us to actually have all of these composable and headless technologies working in tandem without requiring an army of developers or an 18-month development cycle. So we wanted to do something to prove the point, right? The thing that we're always talking about, how quick it is to build these things, how we can get these things up and running as well. So kind of with that in mind, what we wanted to do today is talk a little bit about sort of how we sort of scale this idea in this approach up, right? So we've built the thing, we've built a website, it's leveraging all these cool technologies, it's super fast and functional. So I guess, yeah, let's get started with some questions and conversations. So I'm gonna pick on George to start with. George, how does this scale, right, from a development perspective? Big general question for you to tackle.
It is, but I'll break it down into two parts. And so when I'm thinking about scale, I think of one, the developer experience, and also the technology. And so to cover the technology quick, inherently it's very scalable. All of our APIs have very high throughputs. They're meant to be used at the enterprise scale, thousands of writes per second. Being able to, from an API perspective, know it's always up, it's always on. You're not going to get alerted in the middle of the night. That's the type of technology scale that is inherent with using our services. So we have that going for us. The other aspect I think of is the developer experience, i.e., whether it's a SI agency or internal developers building and using these technologies, there is a day-to-day writing code experience that if it's miserable, they're going to be miserable. And so within the developer experience, there's a lot of, I like to call free things. We've talked about pre-canned integrations, we've talked about starters. And so really where this goes is we've set it up in a way that this is a base. There is things you get for free. There are patterns that are set up. And so from a developer experience, you're doing things you like, writing code that is in whatever language. I'll say we use React, but it is language agnostic at the most part. But you get a base that is in a language that everybody generally knows from a developer standpoint, and it has preset patterns. So what you do with the preset patterns is start layering in your own business logic. And so you aren't focused on how does a cart work? How do I fetch products from Algolia and Power Search? You can start thinking about the next level things. How do I do a search experience that's going to derive more revenue based on what I'm trying to do? And so what we go from that developer experience is you get the base, as I said, and you get easy to use tools so that you can focus on things that, one, you probably want to focus on, but two, are really going to drive the experience forward.
Yeah, I think I loved all those points actually. I think the thing that really kind of sticks out is the having all of these different patterns and frameworks and freebies, right? Having all of those things really does allow us as technologists to actually kind of elevate up a little bit to a higher level of thinking, right? In the sense of bigger picture, right? Of how do we want to do things, like you said, how do I want to, have impactful results on a business need that we have, not just like, how do I do the thing? How do I make the widget function? But when that widget already exists for you, it's then, okay, how do I leverage this in a way that's going to be meaningful to either the end user experience or, produce whatever the KPIs or the ROI statement is going to define that we need to be hitting. So I think that's from a developer perspective, right? I think that's really, really helpful. And that kind of makes me wonder, right? How did we go from sort of the ideation, right? We all got together and we said, hey, let's build this cool swag store, right? Let's build this thing. How did we get from there to where we are today, and where did we have to pivot along the way, right? Because with all great ideas that happen on the back of a post-it note or something, right, there's always going to have to be some last minute kind of change or agile approach to those things. So yeah, let's see what Maribel thinks about that.
Sure, yeah. So we started off with a basic e-commerce site with a React front end. We then started adding all the microservices, so the BigCommerce for the shopping experience, Algolia for the search, and Cloudinary for the imagery, and Contentstack as like the orchestration layer to pull all the content together. And because Contentstack has an integration to all these technologies, it's made the integration so much easier and faster. And if you could share I think I shared some slides with you. If you could show that next. Oh, great. Okay. So I took a screenshot of Contentstack's Cloudinary custom extension. So once implemented, you can see there's this choose assets button. It pops up Cloudinary's media library in an iframe. And from here, you get this functionality of Cloudinary, including uploading any assets, tagging, organizing, editing, etc. And you can pick your asset to pull into Contentstack. So this is kind of how it's working on the Cloudinary end. And then if you look at the next slide, diving into the code here, I added a Cloudinary asset type that describes the Contentstack schema, and then went hunting for all the places that imagery is being used to redo the image sources. And you'll see an example on the right-hand side where images was already being used, and I created a DAM image, and the majority of the images were actually coming from Contentstack or BigCommerce. And I didn't want to blast their images completely in case our scope changed. One hurdle we just recently ran into is the product category pages, basically the PLP. Currently it's serving BigCommerce thumbnails, and we're having to rewrite the logic in Contentstack behind how we display categories so we can pull Cloudinary thumbnails instead. So the work continues, it's not done yet. And if we go to the next slide. So I was able to overwrite the existing image component and utilize it to handle broken images, handle the plain URLs and Cloudinary assets, add modern format and optimizations. I checked for any transformed images that were coming from the Cloudinary media library widget. I'm handling video, displaying alt text, so with existing alt tags or even with the Cloudinary auto tagging capabilities. And lastly, I haven't implemented like our Cloudinary auto width yet, but I'm utilizing the max width in the original code to resize the images. So kind of cheated there. And then if we head over to the next slide, So this is, if you hit play, yeah, this is the product gallery widget, which was initially served by BigCommerce, and I was able to rewrite it to use Cloudinary, as we have the ability to optimize images, support videos, 3D spin sets. I forgot to preface this with, I'm not a full-time React developer, so I'm not totally sure of the best way to include external JavaScript. So I inserted a script tag as the use effect callback, and it worked. And I tried doing it other ways, like with Hamlet, and I got a lot of errors. So this probably could be improved. And so here's the product gallery widget in the action, and you can see it traverse through the content. You can see that it had zoom steps. And I added a cup at the end. You probably thought that was random, just to show that we support 3D spinning and zooming. And I didn't add a video here, but perhaps you'll see that when we go live and we showcase it.
So I think that there's one big, I mean, this is super cool, right? We all love seeing these neat little things, but the thing that sticks out to me the most actually about what you just said was the ability for us to really kind of pivot and shift from, okay, we put together, a page that just had some generic images, right? And we were able to have somebody like yourself, who's an expert in that media space, very easily be able to kind of take the things that we had put in place, remove that real quickly, and then bring something much better in, right? And I know that sounds like such a simple thing, but that is the huge benefit of Composable, right? It's like, okay, Contentstack, BigCommerce, we can all serve images, but we don't do the awesome sauce that Cloudinary brings to the table, right? So why would you leverage, our features that are there, right? When you have something so much easier that you were just able to say, okay, we've already got the code in place, so I'm not going to rip and replace the whole thing. I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. What I'm going to do is I'm going to overload it so that I can then take in our coolness, or if that's not there, then default back to either the Contentstack or the BigCommerce approach. So I think from, being able to constantly iterate and improve on this thing without having to throw a bunch of code away or end up with a bunch of Franken code, I think that's hugely valuable from sort of a developer community perspective, and being able to sort of move quickly as things change as well. So I think sort of in that same kind of quest for pivoting, right? If we jump over to the next slide, I know George, you wanted to kind of talk to us about how we also pivoted from the commerce side of things as well, but also in terms of sort of how did we go from ideation to execution as well by leveraging the out of the box capabilities here as well.
Yeah, awesome, Nick. And I really do want to talk about this app, because the first time I saw it, it was amazing. It made life so much easier, and I was, oh, this is it. And so from the perspective of, you could imagine setting up products in BigCommerce, and whether, it's an automated process, you could think at scale. Products come from an ERP to BigCommerce. BigCommerce is great at making things transactional, but you may want to decorate them. You may want to merchandise them. Contentstack is great at that. So best in breed, now I have to get this data to Contentstack. In the past, we have examples of pushing data to Contentstack, fairly straightforward. But now I log into Contentstack, I create a listing entity, I say, grab shop all, grab t-shirts from BigCommerce. I merchandise my listing page right in there, add banners, language, all right within Contentstack. Not a developer task. This is marketing, this is operation, this is merchandising. This is click to merchandise in a best-in-class CMS, which to me is mind-blowing. It was so easy. And then, by the way, move that to the product detail page. All of that granular data that's stored in BigCommerce, we think of custom fields, i.e. whatever is unique to your product, send to us, we'll surface it up. Well, all that data can get synced over to Contentstack. You can create all sorts of unique experiences. And then, as Maribel just kind of chimed in, there's an app right within Cloudinary. You can really take in, I like to call it decorate. You have a raw product, you have prices associated with it. BigCommerce is great at that. Contentstack is decorating, making it look beautiful, from listing to detail to cart. And really with an app like this, it's very turnkey. And that turnkey is also extensible. If you dig into the app, you can start thinking about, hey, do I really need all of this data sent over to merchandise? Well, think about field mapping exercises. You can really get under the hood of it and control what gets synced, but out of the box, everything is going to be there. So you still don't lose control, but from an exercise of I log into one platform, I log into another, having that data just shared between the two was a bit of a wow magic moment for me. And when I got under the hood and we started this project and I was able to see it, it was great. And so the value of this, I think, is very tenable from a get moving quick perspective, but also day-to-day operations. And, you know, as I said, integrations between platforms is something that, you know, can be built. Certainly it's available via our APIs and our webhooks, but to have that turnkey, to have it hosted, to have it just work is really amazing, and something that I was pretty excited about, and I can see a ton of value for our customers.
And I think just to sort of pile on there, right, in this idea of us pivoting again, and I know we're going to talk about a cart in just a second, but when we were thinking about the product detail page, the way that we were going to actually have it operate, right, is that the content item existed in Contentstack, right? So I would have a page for Nick's glasses, and then Nick's glasses would have a field, as you see here, that links into BigCommerce. Well, we actually changed that a little bit as well to say, if Nick's glasses doesn't exist in Contentstack, who cares, right? Serve up a product detail page with just the data from BigCommerce. And then if we can find the associated data from Cloudinary, let's do that as well, right? So that if you did decide, hey, in the idea of scaling, if I'm going to have 20,000 SKUs, you're not going to manage 20,000 content entries for each of those. Now, we also have a way of doing that, right? So we can automate that creation of, you know, something is created or updated in BigCommerce. We can leverage what's called the automation hub to actually have that kind of kick off the process of maintaining that in Contentstack. But we kind of wanted to have our cake and to eat it as well. So we kind of created an approach that allows us to not worry if the data doesn't exist in one of the platforms. It'll still get served on the front end, so that whichever team is managing the information at that moment, the front end is going to be impacted by that as well. So I think if we jump over, George, you wanted to talk a little bit about how we did something here with the cart.
Yeah, so definitely thinking about BigCommerce, you know, we have this terminology open SaaS, and inherently when you think of SaaS, you think of easy but not flexible. And so in our world, commerce, a big thing is the checkout. Checkouts can be easy, but sometimes they can be rigid. And so in a project like this, what BigCommerce with our open SaaS philosophy was, we were able to bring a checkout to the table, set it up in 15 minutes, but it's implemented in a way that has full flexibility. And I'll go through the use case quickly. And so what essentially we're doing is, hey, we want a checkout. We feed a checkout items. BigCommerce gives us back a URL. That URL is pre-integrated with BigCommerce. Think of the boring stuff: taxes, shipping, payment gateways, the dangerous stuff, PCI compliance. You know, for a project like this, we don't necessarily want to take on any of that, but we still want it transactional. So within BigCommerce, we're generating that checkout page via the items within the content experience, that is that headless React experience. So what we're able to do is, hey, we have a cart. Before we generate a checkout, maybe we want to do some logic. And we're essentially doing the swag store. Our logic's pretty simple. You can only buy one item via one of the representative brands. Very basic logic, but still you could see business logic gets more complicated. You're just writing code around it. You still don't have to own the checkout. And so very easily, again, going back to that 15 minutes, we were able to implement a cart checkout that's fully integrated. We're not going to collect taxes, but we could turn on tax collection. We could turn on shipping. We could turn on payment gateways, all within our admin. And by the way, we have complex business logic, write our own business code around it, and have all that out of the box. So the open SaaS idea really here is we get an easy to use cart checkout. And by the way, if we needed to add in complex business logic, we can layer in our business logic wherever we want on that either front end or server side.
And I think this is a reoccurring theme, right? Is the idea that there are out of the box freebies or starters or integrations or whatever category they fall into, but they're all open, right? None of this is black boxy. None of this is, oh, you have to do it this way and your business has to adjust. We've already talked about, right, in just a few minutes here. We've pivoted. Some of that was accidental, some of it was with intent, but the way that all of our platforms work together and can be easily customized, I think really kind of speaks to that story. And this isn't just about our platforms, right? I know we keep saying that, but this is part of that sort of the MACH philosophy or the composable philosophy. And that's the importance here. It's not just the four of us vendors that are sort of sitting here talking to you about this project, but the fact that this applies to any good API first platform, right? So, whether you want to pull in a personalization engine to add on top of this, or you need to have a dedicated PIM to feed more information into BigCommerce, or you wanted to use, some other front end as a service framework to power things, right? You can mix and match any of these composable things, right? It's composable, it's in the name. So I just think it's always worth kind of reiterating that this is, that's the goal, is to be able to have whatever you need, right? You, the listener, whatever is going to solve your company's problems or your customers' problems, pick and choose the right kind of Lego building blocks and then build them the right solution. And with all of these things, that just makes it a little bit easier. So I guess, sort of in that mindset of easiness, let's move over to Sajid and see if there's anything from sort of the integration perspective or the pivoting that we needed to do as well.
All right, thanks, Nick. I'm not sure if there's a slide for me. I think maybe the next one. But so yeah, I mean, when we're actually building these applications, we don't really focus on search until later on. But search actually is huge, or it's very important, especially it's a conversion driver. And you want to be able to help customers find the products that they're looking for very quickly. And so search is important. That needs to be looked at in the beginning as well, because anything that you're doing in development from structuring your products will actually impact how we actually push it into the Algolia index itself. So integration, as George mentioned, is hard. So luckily enough, with the lovely folks at Contentstack, they built these integrations for us to make it turnkey, as George mentioned. So there is an Algolia indexing app that's available to the marketplace. And when I say indexing, I think of integrations in like 3 pieces, especially in for the Algolia for Algolia itself. So getting content into Algolia and then serving out the content from a search experience. And then there's also the user behavior, which will help turn on the AI features that we have in Algolia itself. So, but we'll be focusing on 2 things here for the Swag store, which is indexing, which is provided to the Algolia app that's available to the Contentstack marketplace. And here you can see that there's a screenshot of the configuration and also the automation hub, which will be discussed in more detail during the conference itself. I hear that's what I'm hearing, Nick. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. So once the data is, or your content is in one of the Algolia indexes or indices, the next part is actually serving it. Now, being a headless, your presentation is can be controlled by you. We have a list of or different flavors of SDKs in any of your favorite languages, PHP, JavaScript, Java. Also, for the presentation layer, we've gone above and beyond in terms of we built actually widgets. I don't have code right here to show you, but the widget library is essentially a level up on top of our SDK that shows the most basic components that help drive search, from a search box to facets to search results and pagination. So we have quite a bit of a list of widgets that can be leveraged right away, and they're configuration based. I think the only part you may need to do development wise is more putting your branding styling around the widget itself, but functionally, you don't really have to touch it unless you really need to get in touch with those advanced features. So, and then also the Algolia's documentation is pretty good in terms of we not only provide documentation, but we also provide code, even code pen that you can actually see a running application. So anytime you wanted to make a small change to see what the effect would be, you could definitely do that. And we provide the ability to show that.
And I think those widgets were crazy helpful in getting us up and running really quickly, right? The times that we had allocated to some of the search setup from the front end perspective was wildly overscoped when Sajid pointed us over to these widgets that we were just able to deploy, right? And then just throwing like a paint on them, right? We needed to make sure that those classes matched up with what we had in our style guide, and with just a few minutes of CSS work, right? All of a sudden, everything was looking kind of amazing, right? And I think the thing here, right, just to hit the nail one more time on the head is, when we're talking about these composable technologies, there's things that we, from a development and sort of project side of things, you want to make sure that when you're looking at different vendors, you're pulling in, right? So that you need to have great documentation, as Sajid pointed out. With all these composable things we've shown, you have a lot of opportunity to enhance and to change and to do things with, right? So if that's not great to documentation, I'm not talking about good, but it's got to be great so that people can just go through it and find what they need, right? So always check to make sure that's something there. Those freebies, right? Those quick starters, those things that save development hours, right? If you can save hours on any project, that just means you get to do the cool stuff quicker, right? You don't want to have to reinvent the wheel, right? I don't want to have to write a shopping cart, right? Shopping cart's a shopping cart. People expect it to look similar regardless of which site you're on. I personally don't want to deal with some revolutionary, mind-blowing shopping cart experience, right, where things are moving around the screen or something. I don't know, but I think having a lot of those freebies to start with, that's also a huge thing, right? Is those quick starts, those get me from 0 to 55 real quick. I think those are super important benefits that the headless API first composable community really brings to the table. All right, so I think we've talked quite a bit about sort of integrations, how easy and or hard that was really. So I think that's a good thing that we've talked on. But I guess when we stand up a little bit, if we elevate ourselves in our level of thinking here, and we stop thinking about the technological integrations themselves, and we start thinking about having 4 sources of truth, right? Because that's in effect what we have. We have a bunch of information and metadata in Cloudinary, in Contentstack, in BigCommerce, and Algolia. So that's a puzzle unto itself, right? So I guess, Sajid, you were the last to talk, so we're gonna start from the bottom this time. How do you meet in the middle for all that, right? Like that's no small conceptual task to take on.
Yeah, I guess the real question is why all of these technologies? Obviously, you could probably buy one solution that does it all, right? And nothing wrong with that either, right? You want to be able to figure out what your requirements are, and then see if you can figure out like how to make this project less complex. And normally, a lot of people will lean in towards a one solution, right, that could do it all. But then it comes down to maturity. At some point, you're going to hit the boundaries of a dam within a CMS, or if the CMS has a product inventory management in there, you're going to hit a boundary there too. So, a lot of people, when they think about, I have to connect these ISVs or these products together, it becomes very daunting. It's kind of scary. And I think this is the whole point of this webinar, is to show, hey, it's not that scary. Look, we're doing it. We're actually doing it very quickly. Though we're taking some shortcuts here and there just to kind of help demonstrate that. But then overall, if given a little bit more time, we can definitely make this more production ready and much more elegant, and even more, I shouldn't even say scalable, because all of our platforms are already SaaS-based, they're already scalable. And so I think from that point of view, I think it's really comes down to maturity. And I think it's really focusing on, like, what do you need from, let's say, from your DAM system? Am I getting everything that I need from my current product? Like Contentstack has a DAM system already in place, but at some point you're going to outgrow it, and this is where Cloudinary will come in and fit and be able to, with help with the integrations that you have, will allow the customer to use Cloudinary and not be a big full-blown project on that integration.
I mean, I really do love the fact that we've been able to kind of put a little bit of proof in the pudding, right? Of, we've got all these different systems, they're all sort of communicating. And I mean, honestly, if a recovering developer like myself can provide some assistance in something like this, it really can't be that hard, guys. Tell everybody it is hard while you're doing it, so that you can put as much time into it as you want. But I mean, I think we've really seen, right? We've demonstrated that, certainly in the last episode, the last webinar, we sort of walked through what that data model looked like, and then kind of marrying up where we wanted the information to live. Like that, it wasn't that sort of that great of a task in the end, once we got a little bit of understanding on where we wanted things to be. And I think, something you said there towards the end, right, about the extensibility of some of these integrations, right? And, in terms of us being able to get that data to end up where we wanted it to be. I know we talked about it a little bit, but George, I guess if you have any sort of final thoughts on, how much are we able to customize these things, right? We've talked about these freebies, we've talked about these starters quite a bit. I mean, how locked in are we when we start using some of those things?
Yes, great question. And so the lock-in isn't there from a technology standpoint. The way I think about it is what we have defined really as a pattern. Hey, and you can think about software engineering in a general scope, and then commerce as a subdomain. And traditionally that subdomain has had monoliths. People have worked in ETG, they know how that system works, and they really get locked in and focused. And really, if you come off the street as a regular software developer, you think of commerce. Well, what is it? And so what we bring to the table is a pattern of, hey, there's a bunch of services that you can use off the shelf that work traditionally like anything you would write. You call an API, you get data, you put it together. Great, this makes sense from an engineering standpoint. It's a different pattern than that traditional software within an enormous monolith stack. And so what we really introduced is, hey, this is a pre-can. Think of it as a boilerplate starter. These are patterns. These are the best-in-class services that you can put together and quickly, easily, whether it's, hey, I want to create a POC for the executive team to say, hey, we can solve commerce in a really great way pretty easily. We've got an existing infrastructure in sight. Look at this pattern I put together in a week. Now I'll go out and implement it in my own stack. That's certainly something that I could see people doing and taking this. But also, hey, I want to start a new site. Let me start with the pattern, and the front end code is available, fully style it up. Then you're getting into the nuances of business logic. We've talked about the cart example. In our pattern, we only allow you one product per brand. That is pretty simple logic. If you're doing, X millions of dollars, you may have some logic you want to build in. You may want to upsell people when they go to the cart. You may want to do this or that. And so that pattern of, hey, put your business logic here. Don't worry about your cart. Hey, search is all set up. You want to adjust it. You want to do 3D rendering. You want to do video. That pattern's here. So again, I think of it as that boilerplate starter that one, you can use to spin up an experience in a week to tell your team of, hey, commerce isn't that hard. We can put something together. These are some tools that off the shelf I can use to build. Great. I'm not building my own hammer. I'm taking what's out there and using that to build with. And so again, whether you use it for examples to see how it can get built or taking it and extending it, that's really up to, hey, what's the business need? Am I building something net new, or do I want to see how things work so I can implement it into my own stack? And again, we kind of said this in the beginning. This is React. Your team hates React. Okay, just take a look at it, see how it works, throw it away after a week and go do it in Vue. It's no preference on our end.
Yeah, and I think one of the questions that had come up on the side was in that sort of guise, right? What about some of these out of the box integrations that we're supplying, right? That's a great question as well. All of those can be pulled out of the marketplace and added into what's called the developer hub, which gives you full access to the code. So even the integrations between our platforms that exist as sort of these out of the box black box integrations, nope, you've got full access to, add, remove, change. One of a good example might be in something like BigCommerce. I might want to add some filtering when I'm searching through my products to select the products or the categories that I want. So that's something that you could pull down, add some custom logic, much like, George was able to add to the cart. So that being able to add these customizations and these enhancements and these changes to fit whatever your business requirements are is core to this idea of getting these composable sort of omni-channel solutions all plugged into each other. One of the questions that kind of bubbles up a little bit is when we're thinking about kind of a project that involves a bunch of different vendors, right? So I guess I'll ask this to you, Maribel, right? When we're thinking about an implementation of what size is this good for? I guess is a good way to think about it, right? When we have 4 different technologies in play, and we can expect there to be more for a project like this as we scale, how do we manage that, right? How does that get staffed? Is it better for dedicated teams or mixed teams, or what are our thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like it depends like what you have to work with. If you're a small team, you're just gonna pull it together and everyone's going to have like a piece of it. You're definitely going to have to be developer heavy to be able to piece all these things together. And I feel like, if you're a startup, you get a blended set of experts. If you're a larger team, you can break it into chunks. Maybe like DevOps can take a piece, development can take a chunk, and then support teams can help, also do some support there. But what I do find is that, you're going to want to iterate through, like, yes, you build it, you set it, you forget it, but you're going to want to iterate through. You're going to say like, oh, we have more products to sell, or we want to do 3D spin sets and 3D, support 3D imagery, or maybe we need to do something different with the scale. So every time your development team is going to start to reiterate through it. So it's not, so yes, it's a set it, forget it, but you're also going to build on top of it. So definitely still needs to be maintained and make sure nothing breaks. And but yeah, as far as like who's it better suited for, I say all teams, and that's what's great about us. We're all scalable. So for a person of one team to a person of 2,000 or whatever, you could have everyone work on this.
Yeah, and I think the example we talked about a little bit earlier as well is kind of indicative of that, right? Like, do I want to have people managing my products in BigCommerce, and that's their life, that's where they live, that's their home, right? Or do I want to provide an experience that's a little bit tweaked so that when they go into the CMS, for instance, they're able to do something with those products or upload images, right? So getting to choose how much overlap there is between the different platforms in a composable project, I think is also very powerful, because you get to dictate based on the teams that you have how the technologies are going to work for the end user and not the other way around. So I guess it is kind of a loaded question. I didn't even think about that before, that the right answer is probably all sizes, right? So it is I guess a one size fits all kind of thing. Yeah, so I think that's really interesting, right? And then I guess to kind of in the idea of kind of scaling and getting big with this, right? One of the things that I always think about in projects kind of going down the line, right, is once we're iterating and we're changing and we're evolving and enhancing, right, we want to let data kind of sit at the middle of that. Once we get past a certain kind of size, right, we really need to let data drive a lot of those directions. So I guess to Sajid, where should we find that data? How can we leverage it? Like, when we have these disconnected systems, what's a good approach to kind of let us scale with the amount of data that we'll be getting in the end?
Very good question. I think when we think about data, I was actually thinking about the previous question that someone asked to Maribel, or you asked Maribel, but I was just thinking about in terms of the hard part of any integration is, I think a lot of the integrations you've kind of built already through Contentstack. So the front end piece would only you need developers for that. But when we're thinking of just that aside, we'll visit that in the comment section. When I think about data, I mean, we want to keep, like, I think what it comes down to is the source of truth, right? We want to make sure that we keep data. And let me know if I'm answering the question. If I'm veering off, please bring me back in the lane again. But when you think about data, I think we want to make sure that we keep sources of data and not try to avoid any duplicates. So for instance, products, categories. I think this comes back to our previous webinar. We kind of talked about this as well, is to make sure that, we keep the actual real life source data in the source systems itself. And I think you even alluded to providing a little bit of overlap in terms of providing that same feature or management of that data through the content stack layer, let's say, but then be able to effectively update the data back in the source system itself. We want to make sure those data tend to are clean and not being duplicated in other places, because that becomes very problematic in maintenance and you don't even want to touch, So I think I guess you could say I'm purist in terms of, like, I like to keep all my source data that people manage in their source system. So if I'm going to have a lot of e-commerce merchandisers or, people that are managing my products and inventory, I want them to go to BigCommerce, and then my content, my marketers to come to Contentstack to manage any, not embellishment, but marketing content over the product itself, and then image itself. I want my asset managers to kind of go and make any changes, make sure that not the images that are only being served onto the web, but also their channels as well. And then when it comes to Algolia, it's making sure that you have the right data, and that's kind of where that's where you duplicate, because that's where we're going to be indexing the content, and we want to make sure that every other sources are in sync with what's being pushed into Algolia itself before it's actually being served to the customer. Because you're not serving it from the source system when it comes to search, you're serving it from Algolia, and so that is an important step to kind of make sure that all these systems are in sync. And I think with these integrations will help get the data, cleaned up and synced up to the right sources.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, actually, about if you're ever going to have, and everyone should, some level of searchability and indexability, right? That inherently is duplicitous. Feels like a cruel word, right? But it is in effect, it is a copy of a subset of the data. So I think that's a really interesting point, right? That we want to make sure that all of our systems of record aren't pushing data unnecessarily from one platform into another and then requiring some weird synchronization to keep that stuff updated, because at some point that's going to slow down, or the gears are going to get gummed up, and then we're going to have out of date data that's actually being indexed in some variety. So I think that's a really important decision that needs to be made early on in these projects, right? And again, to your point, we talked a bit about this in the last webinar, but I think it's good just to rehash here towards the end, right? Like, if your data model that you're going to use is a very important upfront decision that needs to be made. While we are all very agile in how we can move, and that can change, right? It's not something that has to be set in stone, but there's a lot of value, right? I'm very happy we defined almost all of that up front. We were able to pivot a couple of things, but we didn't have to make any wild changes to how that information was stored. And I think that really helped us hit our crazy hyper aggressive kind of timelines for how quickly we needed to have this done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting. I guess I would ask, any closing thoughts that anyone wants to share, because I think we're pretty much up at the end of our session here. So yeah, just kind of open the floor up.
I'd say, at least just thinking back at what Mirabel was earlier saying about staffing. I think you actually posed that question, and the way I looked at it was, you have all these accelerators. You have Contentstack providing all these accelerators to integrate with Cloudinary, BigCommerce, and Algolia. That allows me to, as George mentioned, think about my business logic, focus on that, and not necessarily the integration itself. And so when I think about staffing, if the documentation, what you mentioned, has to be great, and you have examples, then I think my team that I would build would be front-end engineers that know how to read API docs. And because a lot of the back-end stuff is already handled for me, getting data moved around is through the integration itself. Now, that would probably be my first step into the project. And then as soon as maturity of my business actually gets to another level where I have complex requirements, then I can look into figuring out how I need to tweak those integrations through the is it the developer hub you mentioned? Okay, yes.
Bingo.
So
Nice plug. Appreciate that.
Of course, but yeah, that's kind of how I would think about staffing, especially if I'm going towards building a this very scalable, getting everything I want solution, and and how we demonstrate that it can be done in a very quick amount of time.
You look like you've got something.
A quick plug to Algolia and our BigCommerce too. We have very active dev communities, and so I see people. I'm active in the dev community. I'm talking about single developers who will build their own front end, take it, plug in tools, and build out the experience in weeks, a month. And that active community plus all the documentation, every day people are building things, asking questions. So being able to take something like this is going to have a big appetite in the dev community, which often gets sometimes forgotten in sales, but there's a lot of people just building stuff and taking it. And that's something that I always find really neat, and something I see a team of one developer, a front-end developer, could take this and put everything together. And then one last thing about that data question, one tee up for this group, one interesting thing would be part 5, data going downstream. I think from a BigCommerce standpoint, we've started making it very turnkey to dump all of your data in a data warehouse. And it would be great to Algolia, Cloudinary, Contentstack, all the data that we collect as individual platforms to help our customers, dump it in the data warehouse and really, start seeing the world of merging everything together. And, we have clients doing that now. So certainly that's something that starts becoming turnkey as far as an operation analytics standpoint. All of our systems can essentially merge the data in, a centralized data warehouse strategy, which is quite neat.
From my side, I felt like Contentstack made the integration with all of us, and that's what made it truly easy. I feel like anybody who's building this, if you didn't start off with Contentstack and you just bought everybody else, you would have to piece the pieces together. And I would like to see some integration happen between BigCommerce and Algolia too, so that we can also make the complete solution to make it completely easy, and not just through Contentstack. And I truly enjoyed working on this project, and I love George's idea of part 5 of what do we do with this data, and how do you make the site faster, better, target the right audience and whatnot. So yeah, there's so much to be done here.
Yeah, I think, right. So we were talking about this a little bit before as well, right? There's so many things I want to add to, keep going, right? The idea of, pulling this into a business intelligence platform to start, parsing through the analytics and see what customer behavior is leading us to, and all these things, right? All this coolness that we can start adding in. So I think that's it's invigorating that these things are not just possible, but we've made them quite easy to do, which is wildly impressive, I think. So yeah, I guess, thank you guys very much. For everyone who's sitting here thinking, hey, when are we going to get to see this thing? Well, this thing, we're going to unveil the our version of this experience live on stage with a live practical demo, which you'll be able to see and experience both in person and virtually as well. So if you can make it to ContentCon, which is the 23rd of May to the 25th down in Austin, Texas, please go ahead and register and get yourself there. It is bound to be an absolutely fun-filled adventure. And if you can't make it in person, go ahead and register to join us virtually as well, right? So that you can kind of see the culmination of all of this, all of these conversations, and see what actually kind of came out of this. I know we're all very excited to sort of pull off the covers and show you the thing. So very excited for that. To my fellow speakers, thank you guys very much for taking the time out of your day, and everybody who has actually paid attention. Well done. I know we all sit through a lot of webinars, so I really appreciate the attention. And yeah, have a great and wonderful day wherever you might be in the world.